Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. Today I'm going to talk about the latest rumors regarding the coronavirus and when sports can possibly return. There's been more stuff out since I last spoke yesterday, and other stuff regarding COVID-19 as well. The Chicago Blackhawks have a major shakeup in their front office. I forgot to talk about that on yesterday's show, but we'll address it today. The Winston to the Saints deal is official. I'm going to redraft the 2015 NBA draft, and we'll preview tonight's episode of The Masked Singer. All right, we'll start with the coronavirus. The latest thing to come out is that there's a report that came out that said that MLB is near certain for 2020, and that senior MLB officials are confident that a season will occur this year, despite the details being debated. And then there was another thing that came out that said that baseball will begin no later than July 2nd. I proposed July 4th to be an opening day, but like in quarantine areas. But I'm wrong here. It's before the 4th of July, and not only is it before the 4th of July, they're saying that it could be in home stadiums, but without fans. And then possibly with fans returning for the playoffs, which would be pushed to November. I think that is something I'd sign up for. We'll embrace the no fans thing for a while, and then maybe they'll start to have fans in the seats by, let's say, September, and they could spread them out a little bit, and then once the playoffs roll around, they can have full capacity, because I truly think things will be back to normal sort of by the fall, and that we'll have fans in the seats in sports games again. So that is huge news. Another thing that was thrown out there in terms of the baseball is that the realignments for the divisions for this year, the MLB East, the MLB Central, and the MLB West, so it would be 10 teams per division. It's basically combining the AL East and the NL East, the AL Central and the NL Central, and the AL West and the NL West, with an exception. The AL West and the NL West are combined, but they flip-flopped the Pirates and the Braves. They're going to put the Pirates in the East and the Braves in the Central. So teams like the New York Yankees and the Washington Nationals and the New York Mets and the Tampa Bay Rays catch a huge break by the Braves being out of that division and into the Central Division and getting a poor team like the Pirates in the East. And then in the Central Division, the big losers for the Braves being put in that division are the likes of the Reds, the Cubs, the Indians, the White Sox, the Twins, the Cardinals, the Brewers, all these teams that are looking to be competitive and good this year get a contender in their division in the Braves. So that is a big loss for them. And the fact that the Braves aren't in the East Division, I think, is a huge win for teams like the Yankees, the Rays, the Nationals, and the Mets. And the West Division is the AL West teams and the NL West teams, which have a lot of rebuilding teams, a couple contenders, and then some of those middle-tier teams like the Diamondbacks and the Padres, those teams that are just trying to win and break through. And then you have the contenders like the A's and the Dodgers. And you have those rebuilding teams like the Giants, the Rockies, the Mariners, the Angels. Although the Angels are trying to be good, but I'm really not sold on the Angels. The Rangers are sort of in the middle, too, with the Angels. So maybe that division is a little more tougher than I've initially given credit for it. And obviously the Astros are in there, but I think they're a little bit of an unknown, and there's going to be a lot of turmoil because of the cheating. But everybody forgot about that because of COVID-19. Let's face it, nobody's going to remember that. Unless if they're in the postseason and playing in Yankee Stadium, they're going to get booed the living hell out of them. Or in Dodger Stadium, or if the Red Sox were to be in the postseason at Fenway Park. Like, those fans would boo the living hell out of the Astros. The Mets fans even would, if we somehow had an Astros-Mets World Series, or the Nationals if there's a rematch. So that's one of the forgotten storylines coming into this new baseball season, how the Astros perform in the wake of the cheating scandal, the new manager, and Dusty Baker, and all that. But we'll talk about the ramifications of baseball coming back on another show, and obviously once it's official that the season would potentially start, let's say it starts July 2nd, then somehow or sometime in the middle of June I'll probably have a couple guests on the show and do some predictions and do some fun activities. I'll probably do the prospects and stuff again, like I did last year a few times. And then, obviously, the other thing that came out from baseball is that the draft will still be taking place on June 10th, which falls on a Wednesday. And it's going to be a virtual draft, just like the NFL did theirs. And now the question is, will it go 5 rounds or 10 rounds, the draft? Because they cut the number of rounds for the draft. Because, like all these high school kids, they keep getting drafted in these later rounds, just commit to college anyway. I think they're going to go up to 10. That's my opinion. I think that's fair because there's always these college kids. If they go to 5, then it wouldn't be fair to some of those college kids that want the chance to become big leaguers. But sometimes undrafted players make it. It's not common, but sometimes that's the case. So next week I'm going to do my actual first MLB mock draft of the season. Now we know that we're going to have a Major League Baseball draft. And then one more coronavirus sports-related item. Hockey, it's increasingly likely that they are going to start the 2020-2021 season in December. I proposed that yesterday on the show with the NBA, and I said that the NHL should follow suit if the NBA does do it. So that's what it looks like the NHL is going. And the fact that they're talking about pushing the start of the regular season to 2020-2021 tells me that they're definitely coming back to finish this season. And now there's rumors that they're actually going to finish the regular season, which I think is pretty awesome because you have these teams that are very close to these playoff spots. Like in the Eastern Conference, you have the New York Islanders and the New York Rangers very close to that 8th playoff spot. And in the Western Conference, you have a lot of teams battling, like the Calgary Flames and the Minnesota Wild and all these teams in the Western Conference fighting for their playoff lives as well. But the NBA, I wouldn't be shocked if they went straight to the playoffs because the playoff spots in the East are wrapped up. And then in the West, they're sort of wrapped up. But I think the NBA will finish off the regular season because they want to get to 70 regular season games for every team. So the players can get paid properly, and the same is what the NHL looks like they are trying to do as well. One regular coronavirus item, New Jersey is reopening state parks and county parks and golf courses Saturday, May 2nd. That is a very, very good sign, in my opinion, as they are slowly but surely reopening things and whatnot. We saw California reopen some beaches, and that surprised me because I thought that Governor Newsom was being very, very strict. And I'm surprised that Governor Murphy is reopening some of the things in New Jersey because he's been very strict. But let's face it, the numbers keep going down, which is a good thing. And slowly but surely, I think things will be sort of back to normal before people know it. I'm obviously a half glass full kind of person. I said this yesterday on the show. So I just wanted to bring it up because I think that is a very good sign of things to come. Okay, the Chicago Blackhawks made major news on Monday by announcing the stunning firing of President and CEO John McDonough. McDonough was more involved on the business side of things, more so than the hockey ops decision side of things. But McDonough, I think, had some say in some of their decisions over the past 12, 13, 14 years, however long he was there. He was a big part of their little dynasty they had in winning 3 cups in 6 years. A lot of people thought that the fall guy for the mediocrity over the past couple of years was going to be Stan Bowman, but he is stunningly, in my opinion, still in the front office. I think he's on the hot seat personally. I was talking to my buddy Derek Brandon Felix, who I have on this show occasionally and every so often, and he thinks that Bowman should be the fall guy, and I agree with him. And I do think that Bowman will eventually lose his job. And just from hearing people in the Chicago media, because they're equally as stunned as I am about it, they think that the Blackhawks saw what the Bulls were doing and decided to do a little bit of a copycat, because the Bulls have been in mediocrity over the past 3-4 years as well. And they finally got rid of Gar Forman, although John Paxson got reassigned in their front office, but they made some major changes in their front office, and they probably saw what the Bulls did and say, hey, maybe we should do this. And then the other rumor was that Rocky Wirtz's son, Danny, had a power struggle sort of with John McDonough. Maybe it was on some decision makings, and Rocky sided with the son and ultimately fired John McDonough. So that rumor was also going around as well. I wonder who they are going to bring in. I wonder if they're going to bring in somebody that's more of a hockey guru. And what is Stan Bowman's future? What is the head coach's future, who I think did okay replacing Joel Quenneville? It's tough to replace a legend, as we know, in sports. So we'll see if their head coach comes back, and we'll see if Stan Bowman ends up being safe or not as well. Speaking of general manager rumors and changes, but as of right now, the New York Knicks will be keeping general manager Scott Perry on board. 1-year extension just through next season under Leon Rose. Scott Perry has done some good things and he's done some bad. He was somebody that Steve Mills and James Dolan brought in after the firing of Phil Jackson. He did well in the Carmelo Anthony trade, in my opinion, getting that pick from Oklahoma City, that second rounder that wound up being the Bulls pick, that the Bulls traded them for Zach LaVine. That turned out to be Mitchell Robinson. So you got to give him credit on that. He drafted Mitchell Robinson in the second round. That was a steal. I like RJ Barrett. I do think he has a chance to be a star. And worst case scenario, a very good starting two-way player in the NBA. So I think he did a good job with RJ Barrett, but he obviously failed with the Kevin Knox selection as of right now. Year 1 had some problems, and then year 2 he got worse. He was easily the worst lottery pick of that draft. Like, Kevin Knox didn't even make my redraft. And then they stole the kid from Michigan in the second round last year, who didn't even see time with the Knicks because they wanted to play some veterans, and David Fizdale and then Mike Miller obviously wanted to save their jobs. And there's some talk that Mike Miller could conceivably come back. I would be against it. Derek is actually for it, I believe. I think that Derek would be for that because he likes Mike Miller. I do too, but to me he's a assistant more so than a head coach, like a top assistant type of guy. And if I'm the Knicks, I think the coaching search is going to be a little bit of Scott Perry, a little bit of, I think James Dolan may have a say in there, but supposedly he's out of the operations, but we'll see. and obviously the head guy is Leon Rose. And I think that he's going to bring some other people in to help him out. A lot of people think that Tom Thibodeau is a lock for this job. I do not think so. I wouldn't be against the Tom Thibodeau hire, but my issue would be is that there would be better guys available. Kenny Atkinson, to me, is the very best fit for this job. Me and James Celestin have preached about it on our shows a lot. I think Brooklyn made a mistake in firing Atkinson, and I think that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving just didn't want him there. And it would be only fitting if the Knicks hire Atkinson, and it's like a stick it to the Nets kind of a thing. Like, that would be something the Knicks would do, in my opinion. And I hope they do it. Kenny Atkinson is the best coach available for the type of situation the Knicks are in. The Knicks are in a rebuilding situation, and Kenny Atkinson went to Brooklyn when they were in a rebuilding situation, and he got the Nets to overachieve these last couple years. Yeah, they were sub 500 this year, but they were sub 500 because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were injured, not because of Kenny Atkinson. And that's why I think that Kenny Atkinson did not deserve to get fired whatsoever. But so yeah, the Knicks bring back Scott Barry for one more year. And in terms of what's to come, hire the coach, nail your draft picks, and don't forget to have the extra first rounder due to the Clippers overpaying for Marcus Morris, and the Wizards being in that trade as well certainly helped. So they ended up getting a couple picks for Marcus Morris, including a first round pick in 2021 from the Clippers, and that's obviously going to be in the 20s. So sometimes guys in the 20s work out and become solid players. It happens. So you got to draft well. The Knicks are probably hoping to get in the top 5 of the lottery again, because there's some good players in this draft. I absolutely love Obi Toppin. James Weissman is somebody that I like. I love Cole Anthony. I just think he was in a bad situation last year in North Carolina, getting injured, and he had a lot of pressure on him. But he could have benefited from going back to school, but I still think that somebody may take him in the lottery. I'm not a LaMelo Ball fan that much. I don't know. It's just something about him. And then there's a lot of guys I do like in the draft, and there's a lot of guys I do not like in the draft. And another guy I like in the draft is Anthony Edwards, but to me he's like a worser version of what they already have in RJ Barrett. So we'll save NBA draft talk for another day. All right, the New Orleans Saints finally make the Jameis Winston deal official, a 1-year deal to back up Drew Brees. They're probably hoping that it's a situation potentially of somebody getting injured, and then they trade Winston and get something for him. And it's kind of like what the Jets did with Teddy Bridgewater. They signed him in free agency. And then, not that Drew Brees got injured, but they traded for Teddy Bridgewater and gave the Jets a 3rd-round pick. They're probably hoping, or not hoping, you wouldn't want somebody to get injured. But if somebody gets injured, they can, that team can go out and trade for Jameis Winston, and the Saints can get something for him. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt for the Panthers, and the Panthers are a team that wants to be competitive in Matt Rule's first season. So it wouldn't surprise me somehow. Like, let's say Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt. That would be a team that would trade for Jameis Winston from New Orleans. Or if Drew Brees gets hurt, that's what New Orleans does not want. They have very quality insurance now to potentially back him up. Don't forget, Brees got hurt last year, and they had Teddy Bridgewater, and that was great insurance, and that parlayed him into the big contract he got from the Carolina Panthers. And then, obviously, I talked about the other day that they re-signed Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill's not just a quarterback. He could do everything. Like, he could play at wide receiver. He could play at tight end. He could do running back. He could do the wildcat. He could be a special teams player. Like, he could do everything. So, I thought New Orleans was smart to lock up Taysom Hill for another couple of years. So Jameis Winston to the New Orleans Saints is officially a done deal. Now I want to do my 2015 NBA redraft. This is interesting. There's a lot of guys in here that have broken out over the last year, and you would have thought that they'd be in the top 10, let alone the lottery of this redraft. But here we are. So without further ado, here we go. Number 1, Minnesota Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns. No do-over here as Minnesota takes their franchise player. 2, the Los Angeles Lakers, D'Angelo Russell. No do-over here as they take Russell, who really broke out onto the scenes over the past couple of years with Brooklyn and now with the Warriors. The Lakers wound up trading Russell away. And that was I think, perhaps the best deal that Sean Marks has ever made. Because let's face it, if it wasn't for D'Angelo Russell breaking out last season, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are not Brooklyn Nets. That's my opinion. And although the Lakers did get that pick that netted them Kyle Kuzma in that deal, I think Brooklyn won that deal because that trade netted them D'Angelo Russell. He had that career year, and then they wound up getting Kyrie and KD because of D'Angelo Russell's career year, and that really is what made the Nets a destination. The 76ers at 3 go with Kristaps Porzingis. So they take Porzingis here to pair up with Joel Embiid in the front court. You'd have Porzingis at the 4 and Embiid at the 5. And then when you go small, take Embiid out, put Porzingis at the center position. And, boy, did you imagine Porzingis with Towns with Embiid and Ben Simmons? That would be crazy. Like the 76ers, that was conceivable, but they blew it. They took Jahlil Okafor. Number 4, the New York Knicks go with Devin Booker. With Porzingis off the board, they go with Devin Booker, somebody who really has gotten better over the past couple of years. He still is not a good defensive player, but he's getting better offensively each and every year with the Suns. I think that the Suns are an up-and-coming team in the NBA. I think they could be a playoff team in the 2020-2021 season if a couple things break right for them and if they make the right off-season moves. And if the Knicks took Devin Booker here instead of Porzingis, is Devin Booker still a Knick? I would say so. You know why? Because the Suns have been just as bad as a franchise as the Knicks over the last 5-6 years. And they have a bad owner like the Knicks do. And Devin Booker never wanted out of Phoenix. I know everybody is predicting that he'd eventually want out, but that hasn't happened yet. So had the Knicks taken Devin Booker, maybe things would be better and maybe they'd have free agents there. Although Porzingis, in my opinion, is a better player than Booker, although Booker is the safer bet because of health issues with Porzingis. But Porzingis has a bigger upside and is a better two-way player than Devin Booker, and that's why I have Porzingis over Booker in this redraft. And instead, the Knicks went with Porzingis. That turned out well the first couple of years, and then one of the bad moves that Scott Perry made as Knicks general manager is trade Porzingis away for a lot of guys that were either on expiring contracts or has not panned out, like Dennis Smith Jr. But they do have 2 picks coming, so that trade is not officially a loser yet because they have 2 first-round picks coming from the Mavericks in that deal. So that's not a done deal yet with that trade. The Orlando Magic at number 5 go with Kelly Oubre Jr., someone that really has broken out onto the scenes with the Phoenix Suns. Emerged as a very good two-way player, 3-and-D. The Suns love him. Him and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton is a nice foundation for Phoenix. And if he was on Orlando, he'd fit really nicely with Nikola Vucevic and some of their players. But if he was on Orlando, then do they trade Evan Fournier? That's a question that would have been an unknown. Instead, Orlando went with Mario Hezonja. 6, Sacramento Kings, Christian Wood. Who would have thought that Christian Wood would be in the top 10? That's why I said there's guys you never would expect to be in the top 10. But here we are. Christian Wood, someone that had a breakout year with the Pistons this past year. Someone that's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. I think it's restricted, though. So who knows? Maybe it's going to be tough for Detroit to keep him. There's a possibility that Wood is a one-year wonder and he benefited from Blake Griffin being injured and got the opportunity to play. Or maybe he is a late bloomer. You never know. We'll find out as time tells. And let's say the Kings take Christian Wood here and he's the same guy as he is today. And at the time they had Boogie Cousins, they would have had a really, really potent front court there with Wood and Boogie. And instead, Sacramento took Willie Cauley-Stein. The Nuggets at 7 go with Justice Winslow. Winslow is somebody that a lot of people feel that hasn't lived up to expectations in the NBA. Somebody that the Miami Heat were very high on. They wound up trading him away to Memphis in the trade that netted Miami. Who went to Miami in that deal? Jay Crowder? Yeah, I think it was Jay Crowder and another role player. But whatever it was, Miami, I think, overpaid. And the Grizzlies got themselves a player to go with their excellent young core of Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant with Justice Winslow. Maybe he benefits from a change of scenery. But if he was on the Nuggets, he would have been in a good situation there too with Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray as well. Instead, Denver went with Emmanuel Mudiay. 8, the Detroit Pistons go with Josh Richardson. Josh Richardson really has emerged as a very solid two-way player. Somebody that the Heat liked as a player, and then they traded him in the sign-and-trade package for Jimmy Butler. And now Richardson is the starting two-guard on the Philadelphia 76ers. And he certainly would have been a starting player on the Detroit Pistons. Instead, the Pistons went with Stanley Johnson. The Charlotte Hornets at 9 go with Montrezl Harrell, somebody that really has come into his own since the Clippers got him in the Chris Paul package. He showed promise with Houston, and then they sent him away in that Clippers package for Chris Paul. And you could argue he should be starting for the Clippers, but no, he's coming off the bench, and Ivica Zubac is starting for the Clips, and or was starting for the Clips. And Hal's a very good contributor, could put up a double-double, has a lot of energy. Reminds me a lot of Kenneth Faried. And instead, Charlotte went with Frank Kaminsky. Number 10, the Miami Heat, Miles Turner. So Miles Turner falls to them at 10, somebody that Indiana would sometimes start with Domantas Sabonis and other times would be coming off the bench. Turner is somebody that I think Indiana is dying to trade. And he actually led the league in blocks in the 2018-19 season. And he's a solid player. I believe he can start for a lot of teams. But it's just a weird situation in Indiana with him because they wound up stealing Sabonis away from Oklahoma City in the Paul George deal. And now they have two bigs. And sometimes they play them together, and sometimes they play them separately. But he's a pretty good player. And instead, the Miami Heat go with Justice Winslow. Not a bad pick, but obviously Miami was expecting more out of him. The Indiana Pacers at 11 go with Terry Rozier. Rozier is somebody that was a solid player for the Boston Celtics and wound up getting overpaid by Charlotte in the sign and trade for Kemba Walker and for agency. He would have been a good sixth man on Indiana at the end of the Paul George era and right now as well. Instead, Indy goes with Miles Turner, and he's still on the team, and we just talked about Miles Turner. The Utah Jazz at number 12 go with Willie Cauley-Stein. So this one would have been interesting. Cauley-Stein is somebody that can start on a couple teams, and somebody that could be an above-average reserve on the right team as well. He was highly touted at Kentucky, and then he was in a bad situation in Sacramento, and he bounced around a little bit. He would be a backup on Utah because of the presence of Rudy Gobert. Maybe they trade Cauley-Stein to Memphis for Mike Conley or something, or put him in another trade. By the way, Utah 12 took Trey Lyles that year. The Phoenix Suns at number 13 go with C.D. Osman. Who would have thought C.D. Osman would be in the lottery, but here we are. He's somebody that really has emerged as a solid player for the Cavaliers after LeBron James departed. He was even a nice player when LeBron was there off the bench, but he's got the opportunity to start after LeBron left, and he took the opportunity and ran. He probably could have been a starter on the Suns, or most likely a sixth man. And they obviously took Devin Booker, who I have going fourth in this redraft. The Oklahoma City Thunder at 14 go with Norman Powell, somebody who's a really good role player on the Raptors, would have been a good role player on those OKC teams, and even on today's OKC team as well. And instead, they go with Cameron Payne. 15, the Washington Wizards go with Larry Nance Jr. With Kelly Oubre off the board, they go with Larry Nance Jr., somebody that has capabilities of putting up a double-double. Showed promise with the Lakers, and then the Lakers dealt him to Cleveland in the deal with Jordan Clarkson. The Lakers got that first-round pick. So Larry Nance, I think, would have been a nice contributor to the Wizards. Probably would be starting for them right now. And instead, the Wizards went with Oubre, like I talked about, and obviously Oubre's a very good player right now. The Boston Celtics at 16 go with Bobby Portis. Portis is someone drafted by the Bulls. Somebody that was known for punching a player, and then he wound up getting traded to Washington. Had a good little run with Washington, and then the Knicks overpaid him in free agency. He had good moments this year at the Knicks. He did. He's not a bad player. He's somebody that can sometimes block shots, has a good shooting length, and a very solid player. He'd be a good bench guy for the Celtics. And instead, they go with Terry Rozier, which was not a bad selection because obviously they flipped him for Kemba Walker technically this summer. The Bucks at 17 go with Rice O'Neal. Rice O'Neal is someone that has been a solid role player for the Utah Jazz over the past couple of years. Coming off the bench, he's a good 3-and-D guy. He certainly would be coming off the bench with the Bucks too. And instead, they go with Rashad Vaughn. 18, the Houston Rockets go with Rashawn Holmes. Someone who really has come into his own the past couple of years with Phoenix and now with Sacramento. He probably would be a bench guy for the Rockets. Instead, they go with Sam Decker. The New York Knicks at 19 go with Pat Connaughton. Someone that's a bench guy for the Milwaukee Bucks. He probably would be a bench guy for the Knicks too. And instead, New York goes with Jerian Grant. 20, the Toronto Raptors go with Rondae Hollis-Jefferson. It's funny how things work out. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is a member of the Raptors right now. He's somebody that showed promise with Brooklyn, and then Brooklyn wound up getting rid of him. And now he's a solid role player on Toronto. And instead, the Raptors took DeLon Wright. The Dallas Mavericks at 21 go with Quinn Cook. Quinn Cook is a backup point guard on the Lakers right now. Was a backup to Stephen Curry in Golden State. Solid player, can shoot very well. Probably would be a reserve on the Mavs today. And instead they go with Justin Anderson. 22, the Chicago Bulls go with TJ McConnell, a solid backup point guard. Everybody loved him in Philly, then he bounced around a little bit because people were noticing his flaws. He probably would have been a bench guy with the Bulls. And instead, they go with Bobby Portis, which was not a bad pick. 23, the Brooklyn Nets go with Willie Hernan Gomez, someone who the Knicks stole in the second round, somebody that was capable of putting up double-doubles. Then the Knicks traded him to Charlotte for a second-round pick for whatever reason. Maybe because he wasn't getting playing time or whatever. And he's still not getting playing time in Charlotte. But this guy still has some potential. Maybe Brooklyn trades him for something. And instead, Brooklyn went with Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. The Timberwolves at 24 go with Frank Kaminsky, somebody that was a lottery bust. I believe he's on the Suns right now, if I'm not mistaken. And I loved him at Wisconsin. I was a huge fan of him at Wisconsin. And I was very wrong about Frank Kaminsky. And he'd probably be a reserve on Minnesota. And instead they go with Tyus Jones. 25, the Memphis Grizzlies, Mario Hezonja. Somebody that's bounced around the league the past couple years. Portland, the Knicks. Obviously started out with Orlando. Someone that could occasionally shoot it from three, but is a poor defensive player. Probably a role player on the Grizzlies. And instead, Memphis goes with Jarrell Martin. 26, the Spurs, Stanley Johnson. He falls to them at 26. The Pistons were high on this kid, and he really never lived up to expectations. And now he's in the G League or with the Raptors as a role player. And he probably would be the perfect Spur, the guy that doesn't live up to expectations, and then he goes to the Spurs and turns his career around. I've seen that with a lot of players in the NBA. And instead the Spurs went with a guy that's never seen the NBA floor in Nikola Miltonov. The Lakers at 27 go with Kevon Looney with Nance off the board. They go with Looney, somebody that had moments on the Warriors championship teams, whether it was in a starting role or off the bench. He's still on the Warriors today, and I believe he got injured last season, so he didn't even see much time. He probably would have been trade bait. Maybe he's in that Cavs trade instead of Nance. I don't think he'd be on the Lakers today. They probably would have traded him. The Celtics at 28 go with Emmanuel Mudiay, somebody who else has bounced around the league. He went from the Nuggets to the Knicks to the Jazz. Just bounced around a little bit. Did not live up to expectations. Probably would be a backup for Boston. And instead they go with R.J. Hunter. 29, the Nets, Jahlil Okafor. Okafor falls from 3 to 29. It's ironic because Okafor did have a little stint in Brooklyn when they traded for him. And now he's in New Orleans backing up Zion Williamson. And then before that, Anthony Davis. And kind of revitalized himself a little bit into a very solid backup big man. It was just that expectations were very high and wasn't a good fit in Philly. And he's always going to be perceived as a bust because, including myself, I thought he was going to be a franchise player, but I was way wrong about him. In Golden State at 30 goes with Jerry Grant, someone who started off with the Knicks, then went to the Bulls. They bounced around a little bit throughout the league. I believe he was on Orlando and Atlanta. Probably would be like a third-string point guard on Golden State. And that is my 2015 NBA redraft. Last but not least, I want to preview tonight's episode of The Masked Singer. We're down to the final 6. You have Rhino, Night Angel, Astronaut, Frog, Kitty, and Turtle. I'm curious to see who goes home tonight. If I had to make a guess, I'm going to say it's Rhino, and I still think it is Tim Tebow. And my guess is for the rest of the crew as of right now, Astronaut, I still think it's Jesse McCartney. A lot of people seem to think it could very well be country singer Hunter Hayes, but I'm not getting country vibes from the Astronaut. I'm getting like soulful, sort of boy bandy kind of vibes. I think it's Jesse McCartney. Like, I know that voice. I know people were throwing out some of the same guesses for Turtle as astronauts, such as people from NSYNC and New Kids on the Block and Backstreet Boys as well. Frog, I think it's Alfonso Ribeiro. Sharon Osbourne guessed him last week, and Sharon Osbourne was all over Bret Michaels last week for the banana, and she proved to be right. I think she did a great job last week as a guest panelist. I still think it's Alfonso Ribeiro, but I don't feel good about it. A lot of people seem to think it's either Kevin Hart or Bow Wow. I think it's more likely Bow Wow than Kevin Hart, but that's just me. And by the way, Gordon Ramsay joins the panel tonight in the episode, so that should be pretty fun. So that's somebody different in terms of a guest judge. So yeah, I'm sticking with my Alfonso Ribeiro guess. It's a lot of vocals that make me think of him, as well as some of the clues that were thrown out in the package. The Turtle, I think, is AJ McLean of the Backstreet Boys. A lot of vocals, and I'm getting Everybody vibes just from some of his performances. And a lot of people are guessing Joey McIntyre and Donnie Wahlberg. I've heard Jesse McCartney guess for the Turtle too. I think it's more likely that he's the astronaut than the Turtle. And then we have Kitty, who I think is going to win. I think she's fantastic. I think it's Kristen Chenoweth of Wicked. Could be Idina Menzel. There's a couple other possibilities that it could be too. Kate Bosworth is somebody that has emerged as a possible Kitty candidate because the Kitty has two different color eyes on her costume, and Kate Bosworth has two different color eyes. Nicole Scherzinger last week guessed Emma Roberts. I thought that was a very solid guess by Nicole. I think Nicole could very well be right on this, but I'm going to stick with my guns and go with Kristen Chenoweth because I think the clue of the tree, and Anna Gasteyer was obviously in Wicked. She was the tree in season 2, and Kristen Chenoweth was in Wicked as well. So that's my guess for the Kitty. Night Angel, I'm sticking with my guns and going with Kelly Rowland. Just the vocals. There was a tricycle. That makes me think it was a trio. Could be triple threat, though. But I'm going to stick with my guns and go with Kelly Rowland on that. And did I miss anybody? Astronaut, I talked about already. The Rhino, I think, is going home, and I think it is Tim Tebow. There's a lot of hints towards religion. And there was Florida surfboards. So surfboards, Florida, Florida Gators. And then quarterback. And there's 2 quarters, and he won 2 national titles as the quarterback of the Gators. So I really think this is Tim Tebow. Although there's been hints over the last couple of weeks that could very well be throw-offs or could very well be somebody else, and it may not be Tim Tebow. So it should be a good episode tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing who gets unmasked. All right, so that's it for today's show. Tomorrow I'll recap Masked Singer, my top 10 albums of 2017, the latest coronavirus news. We'll preview Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because don't forget, Millionaire is now on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock on ABC, so we'll preview Millionaire tomorrow night and any other news that breaks in the world of sports. Hope you guys have a great day, everyone.